Climb into the cockpit with Pilot and Link Square's Chief Legal Officer, Tim Perilla, as he invites legal leaders aboard to share advice that will help you navigate even the most turbulent times of in-house counsel work. We'll cover a range of topics from data privacy to legal team structure to public company transactions and beyond. You don't want to miss this series. Fasten your seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. You're listening to Cockpit Counsel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Cockpit Counsel. My name is Tim, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Link Squares.
And I'm Alyssa Verzino, producer and co-host of the show. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Now let's jump into our next episode.
Hey everybody, we are here with Chelsea Hazewinkel, who is the Chief Legal Officer of Paladin Security Group. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
So we start off every episode the same way. It is pilot themed. And so we ask, what is your pre-flight ritual?
Ooh.
Like literally for flying. It's not meant to be metaphorical or anything.
Okay. Well, I'm an efficiency wonk. So if I have to do something for a second or a third or a 400th time, I always like to do it a little bit better than I did at the time before. So when I'm looking at packing, I'm like, how can I make my wardrobe that I'm taking even more efficient and mix and mingle, or my products, the shampoos and stuff, smaller and better. So I get a little obsessive about it, but I think it's kind of a game to me.
Yeah.
And really what I'm doing is I'm thinking through the next few days, the point of where I'm going,
right,
who I'm going to see, what I'm going to be doing, any meetings, talking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I always really like to schedule in a moment of panic.
Okay.
I really like to give myself that panicky break. And
right.
This time, the executive director from the chapter, we were texting in the morning and I thought she was here. And so I was asking her about the weather and changing suitcases, and it turns out she was already in line at security.
Okay.
And so she said, I'm really glad my husband told me to come early because the security line's really long.
Yeah.
So then I decided I should probably go to the airport. But I did have that moment of panic in the car on the way there.
You need at
just
least
to feel
one.
alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then when you get there, you feel like you've overcome something.
Yeah, I'm like, yes,
Exactly.
I did it.
You
And
beat-
then the
you
next
beat the
text,
system.
funnily enough, was from me to her and said, don't worry, I'm through security, I'm in the lounge. And she said, I'm still in line at security because we have different clearances. I have
Yeah, like the Nexus in Canada, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So well worth it. Little pitch for Nexus there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing. Pre-check is in the States is awesome. You can breeze through like that.
Yeah.
We've had-
See, efficiency wonk, right?
Exactly.
You feel amazing.
I had a record. This was a flight to Las Vegas that I was taking. It was like before the pandemic, they had every single day a 9 p.m. flight, left Boston, landed in Las Vegas at midnight. And I live relatively close to the airport, but I went from literally walking out my door and getting in the Uber to sitting on the plane in 36 minutes.
Ooh.
And I was like, yes.
See, that's a story
I've been
that you're
trying to
gonna
beat it.
tell forever. Like you're going to be rocking on your front porch someday.
Yeah.
The grandkids will come and you'll be like, there was this time I showed up at the airport in 36 minutes. I made it on.
That's exactly it.
100%.
So, but yeah, so I hear you, like going in, having that sense of accomplishment is important.
It is.
So let's talk a little bit about your role and your career. I think we're going to be talking about that for a little while here, but maybe just to get us started, what if you had to pick sort of one moment or one mindset shift that you had in your career that brought you to where you are today, that you'd say, had I done something differently, I probably wouldn't be here in this role or thinking about things in this way, what would you say it would be?
I think it would be saying yes to the opportunity and the unknown when I already had something really great with me. And
right.
I think for in-house lawyers, we talk a lot about the difference between when you're external counsel and it's like you're dating your client, but either of you can end it at any given point in time. Whereas when you go in-house, it's like you're married and there's only two ways out and one of them's death. So, pretty extreme. But when you have a great relationship and you still need to divorce the client to move ahead with your job, because what you can't do in-house that you can do as external counsel is have both.
Right. Right.
And so for me, I really loved my team where I was. I'd grown so much. I was being given incredible opportunities, not just as a lawyer, but also really sitting at the table on business deals, getting to basically infiltrate all aspects of the business and listen to people that were experts in different areas and throw out suggestions or improvements, efficiencies that we might do. So when I looked at giving all that up for this unknown opportunity, that was a really, really hard thing to do. And in fact, I'd said no to some other CLO opportunities. And what was different is my boss was, very persuasive, but also very patient.
Okay.
We just kept having the conversation. And I often like to share this story, especially with women, because women leaders tend to be, as a generalization, very, very loyal, very grateful for the opportunities that we have. It's hard for us to let people down.
Yeah.
And I knew that in leaving this great team that I was with, it was really embedded in the operational group, I would necessarily be letting down the team.
Right.
But I look back now, 3.5 years later, and the opportunities and the experiences and the growth and everything that I've experienced at Paladin, it makes me nauseous to think about if I hadn't said yes.
Yeah. It's the leap is probably the hardest part.
Absolutely.
Right. But once you get over the other side of it, I don't want to say never look back, but it's definitely that sense of excitement. That probably why you like the moment of panic as well. For the it's kind of a running theme.
Yeah, true.
All right, networking for lawyers. How do you think it's different for lawyers to go and build their network versus business people?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. I think right at the top, there was always that age-old debate, is lawyering a profession or is lawyering a business? And I think it's both. I think we're very, very lucky to be a part of a profession, and we have a lot of respect given to us before we even do or say anything by virtue of being members of this profession.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm not sure that we're always as open and curious as business people that art lawyers are. So when I'm interacting with business people, what I notice is they ask a lot of questions, and a lot of times they're quite innately curious. Like, oh, tell me more about that. And that's one of my favorite phrases, by the way.
Yeah.
But where are you from, or what do you do, or tell me your story. And they're curious. They want to learn more. They want to expand on their understanding of the world and where it's going. Whereas lawyers, I think, sometimes feel that we have to be giving answers to everything, and that we have to be the SME in the moment. And a lot of times networking is a long game as opposed to a short game. So I think back to a mentor that I had that I thought very, very highly of, still do. And he told me very early on in my career, after I prepared this incredible memo that talked about, this case said this and this case said that and so on. And he said, Chelsea, people pay a lot for your opinion. Have one.
Right.
And that was a very big theme in lawyering, certainly 25 years ago, but I think even today, people are paying a lot for every minute that you're thinking about their problems.
Yep.
So have an answer and have it faster is sort of the mantra.
Yep.
Whereas when you're networking, it's really just about the unknown and walking through that conversation with somebody else and learning as you go and building on it.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to talk to lawyers, because they say, oh, I hate networking, and this is, I've heard increasingly a generational shift where it's getting more pronounced in younger generations. I don't want to network, I want to do my job, then I want to go home to my family. I often think that we're thinking of networking as something that it's not. So networking is not sales necessarily. Networking is just getting to know other people. And one of my favorite expressions about business is that business is just about great ideas and friendship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whenever I go into a room and I'm there to, quote, network, I'm just kind of curious about some of the people that I'll meet and asking them questions and thinking maybe in that moment or for that event, maybe for a lifetime, there's a future friend in the mix or someone that's going to tell me about something really interesting on business.
Yeah, and I think there's probably an element there that's a little, from my perspective, I think it's a little concerning if the younger generation of lawyers are thinking about it that way, because it tells me that they probably don't like what they're doing that much.
Oh,
you know,
interesting.
Like, one of the best parts about networking within the profession is that we have almost instantly this common thing that we do that is the profession, and
Yes.
like we think a certain way about that. We analyze problems in
Yes.
very similar ways, even if we don't necessarily think in the same ways. And so being able to like, I don't know if it's commiserate or connect with others who you know already have that base is good. If you like talking about what you do for a living.
Yes.
If you don't like talking about what you do for a living, then I would imagine networking from like a business perspective would just be awful and a major struggle, right? I mean, think about if you were forced to talk about a TV show that you never watched and had no interest in, right?
Or worse, a TV show that you couldn't stand watching.
Right, exactly, like Game of Thrones, right?
See, now I've never watched it and you clearly don't like it. So you're right. For us to go to a Game of Thrones party would be wretched.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm sure we're probably going to get a whole bunch of people that like will never watch this again because
you're going to get hate mail.
That's okay. I'll take the risk.
Well, I actually think that was Peter Dinklage's show on that. And I'll make a fun little connection and a shout out to my hometown because his recent movie was filmed near Calgary, Alberta.
Okay.
And it was what the Calgary International Film Festival used, or the movie that was shown, I should say, for the 25th anniversary in the gala.
Oh,
so
cool.
there you go.
That's awesome.
3 degrees of separation or whatever that took.
I love it. That's perfect. So for that younger generation and those who just don't like networking, what do you think they're missing out on, and how would you recommend they change their perspective?
Ooh, great question. Well, I think if it was me, I would actually ask them the question of how are you connecting to other people? Because I have my lens on what we're here for the ACC conference, and the Association of Corporate Counsel has given me so much in the last 8 or so years that I've been a member and been involved and been president of the Alberta chapter and so on. I cannot give back enough to ACC because ACC has given me so much.
Yep.
And so because I'm a big advocate of it, and I wish that I'd found it, 10 years earlier, if they're not interested in coming out to something like this, I would say, well, how are you meeting the connections? Because it's possible that they're doing something that I'm not.
Right.
And I would kind of love to learn, more about that. I think I would just sort of share my experiences, and I've got many from, this conference in particular. A couple months after we got back, someone that I'd met here who lived in a different city than I did, and we had connected and talked about stuff. My corporate client and his corporate client, my client was a client of his client. So in other words, the company I worked for was a client of the company he worked for. And his company had asked mine in the operational string to do something that was not such a super great legal idea. Mm-hmm. And they had come running into my office. And instead of it blowing up through channels and, dissatisfaction and them leaning on us and so on, I said, can you just give me 5 minutes? Yeah. And I reached out to that person that I had met and said, hey, so here's what's happened. And it was a 5-minute call, and 4 minutes were spent on how you doing.
Right.
And 1 minute was spent on this really stupid idea came in, and it was great for everybody.
Right.
Because it was something that had managed to make it sort of around him.
Yeah.
So it's stories like that about how you can help your client.
Yeah.
But it's also, and I think this becomes increasingly important when you don't have colleagues and peers and confidants at work.
Right.
So anyone that's at the CLO level, for example, that can be quite lonely. And who do you celebrate with and commiserate with and share ideas with, or if you're a subject matter expert and you are the sole subject matter expert in your company, it's great to have contacts. Again, I'm an efficiency wonk. I like doing everything better every time I do it.
Right.
So I love learning from other people. And then as well, when I started as a lawyer, to where the in-house profession is now, has really grown in stature, in credibility, in recognized necessity. So coming together and congregating in something like this is important to show support for the entirety of the in-house community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of value in understanding how in-house legal organizations of different sizes and different levels of development approach working with the business, right? ACC has always been one for me that, because it is so huge. So, obviously there are others, right? Like Tech GC is another big one. Or I guess what the L Suite now, I think they call it. But, and then there are like local, I know, there are a handful of in-house attorneys just within the Boston community where it's like a law firm will put on a dinner, and like you start to see a lot of the same people at these places. Like, we're not that far separated. But having that having that like broader perspective of like, all right, that person that you were sitting next to has a legal team of 4, and the person next to that person has a legal team of 45, 100, right?
Yes.
And it's like your concerns and the way that you do your jobs is completely different in many ways. And having that perspective and being able to take that into your own practice, I think, is really beneficial.
And one of the other things is, as you expand, our company has expanded a lot over the time that I've been with Paladin. And so as we enter new markets in the States, and you have colleagues and friends that are there, and then perhaps you need a referral on something, you still can't beat word of mouth referrals when somebody has a lived experience with that firm or that lawyer and can say this is where their strengths are, or it's really great. Just even to know when you land in a city, hey, do you have suggestions for where I might take a client for dinner, or
dinner, place to stay.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any areas I should avoid in the city?
Right, exactly.
Little things.
So how would you approach networking from more of a business side?
Sure. I think if we view what is success in the environment a little bit differently, and in particular, I'll talk to introverts for a moment, it can be really hard for introverts to walk into a room where they know no one, and then just sort of strike it up. I always like to go in with sort of 3 questions or 3 things that you can kind of say to anybody. And then I just have it in my back pocket, and it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. One of the things is mostly everybody there is in the same boat as you. But some of the big ones, I mean, I come from Alberta, and we can always talk about the weather because it's so fun and changing and everything else. So I always thought that was a normal thing, but apparently that's quite specific. But usually everybody can relate, experience, comment on, have an opinion on the weather. And then, as I told you earlier, one of my favorite expressions is "tell me more about that." And in general, whatever people say, if you follow up with a big open question like that, it can get into more. Or, somebody might say, oh, well, I had to leave my cat to be here. Or, they'll share some nugget of personal information. And that might be interesting. Oh, where did you take your cat? Or getting into interesting topics and stuff like that. So I'm an innately curious person, and I love learning about other people. The woman that was seated at the table across from me for lunch, I feel like it was such a gift. She was so fascinating and so interesting as she started to tell me her whole story that it was hard to tear myself away. But if, that can be the goal, is just to deliver your 3 questions to 3 different people. Your goal might be, I'm going to be here for an hour. And if that seems too long, I'm going to be here for 15 minutes and I'm going to talk to one person. And the other thing is, you don't have to approach a huge group of people all at once.
Yeah.
And then my plea for all of you super comfortable extroverts out there is, take pity on people that don't seem as comfortable and welcome them into the conversation, because that's a real gift, and people never forget the ones that help them through awkward social situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Awesome. Well, transitioning a little bit. So you were just speaking on a panel all about failure. So would love to hear a little bit about it and some of the takeaways that you think would be helpful for listeners. And Tim also would like to hear your perspective on failure as well.
Yeah, it was a great panel. Big shout out to Robert for putting that together. When we first got together to discuss what this would look like, we wanted to talk about normalizing this concept that everybody fails. And then for me in particular, it was about how do we reframe the experience of failure, which comes in everyday life, so that it can be less flatlining, I suppose you could say, when it happens to you. My thought is that we reframe a failure as not being such an emotional experience and an indictment of who we are as a person, but instead as just a piece of information that's come to us. And so that information can be, you do not understand this concept, if it's a technical test, for example, or that piece of information can be, you're not meeting the expectations, and so on. But what is that piece of information that you're receiving? And then when you take that piece of data in combination with everything about yourself, your experiences, your education, your qualifications, how does that fit in? Is it that you're not honoring all of your experience and education, and instead you're trying to force yourself to do something that's not natural for you? Is it that you just need to tweak a behavior? But that was my in general suggestion. And then another, I think, key takeaway that the audience liked was, and by the way, I'm just going to speak to my own leading comments, because each of Robert, Nina, and Jerry had such profound statements on failure, but I think I would do them a massive injustice if I started trying to paraphrase what they said. And I shared with you that the session was scheduled for 60 minutes and then extended into 90.
That's awesome.
So I very much would fail, pun intended, if I was to try to reframe what they said. But one of the other things I asked of the audience is, in this reframing, somebody challenged me a little bit in the nicest possible way. The question was challenging, and they said, "Well, you're telling us not to do that, but how do we just stop when we can't?" And I said, "Well, 100%." And Robert Falk with the Truth Initiative, I looked on his website when I was asked to be a part of this panel, and something I learned on there, it's about quitting smoking, and I found this surprising. The more times that somebody attempts to quit smoking, the more likely they are to be successful. Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind, because I think the conventional wisdom, and I'm putting that in air quotes for everybody that listens to this, is that if you can't do it the first time, then you just can't do it. Yeah. And that's not at all what the data says.
Right.
So my answer to this individual who said, what if we just can't reframe, is, keep trying.
Yeah.
Just because something's hard doesn't mean we don't do it. But if it gets to a point and you can't do this yourself, then it might be a great idea to bring in somebody else, an expert, to help you uncover why it is that you can't let go of that negative mentality. Because really, we should talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a best friend.
Right.
Not the way that we would talk to somebody that we're bullying on the playground. Right. And so a lot of us wouldn't continue to be friends with someone that's like, you're a complete piece of shit. Or,
right.
How can you be so stupid?
Right.
Or, can you not do anything right? I mean, why would we keep that person in our lives?
Right.
But we keep that voice with us often for way, way too long.
Yeah.
So my advice was fire that itty bitty shitty committee and bring in, new people that are your best friends and that will be supportive of you the way that you would be supportive of so many other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, my perspective on failure is that I embrace it. I've failed like so many times, and I've learned way more from those failures than anything that's been successful, from learning how to I skate and play hockey when I was a kid, to dealing with stuff that's going on this very day at Link Squares. You know, like if you're not, I'm a big believer that if you're not at very serious risk of failure with just about everything you're doing, you're probably not pushing it hard enough.
100%.
Right.
And that's why we show up to the airport 36 minutes before our flights.
That's right.
Because we just got to live on the edge.
That's exactly correct.
And I think you're really spot on. And I think as we move along in our careers, especially as we step into bigger and bigger roles, we start to think that that role signifies that we are beyond making a mistake, that we are beyond reproach, we are beyond any of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit of a dangerous mentality to get into.
Yeah.
There's nothing authentic about being flawless and perfect. And that's a hard pressure to put on yourself. I heard a podcast with Barack Obama one time, and he said the tough thing about being president is nobody ever comes to you with a solvable problem.
Yeah.
Because the way that the decision tree has worked is that somebody else has solved it along the way.
Right.
I took from that, you're just looking for the best answer when there is no one right answer.
Right.
And inherent in that is getting comfortable with the idea that you could at any point be making the wrong answer, but choosing to make a decision is in itself a decision.
Right.
So we need to keep moving forward on, I made the best decision at the time, and that sort of thing. And I'm with you. I'm always up for trying new things. I shared with the audience today that I took up tennis in 2024.
All right.
Which is a really ambitious sport for someone in their mid 40s
It is.
decide to do. But it was so humbling. And I would come home and just like ache because it was totally different muscles than I was used to. And my kids were like, oh, how did it go? And this wasn't just like normal, tennis. I signed up for a very intense cardio tennis class, which is like 60 minutes of like running and drills and everything else, because I have to be tricked into running. I don't really enjoy it in and of itself.
Right.
And my kids every week would be like, how did it go? And I was like, well, this week there was 16 people there and 15 of them were better than your mommy.
Right.
And then the next week I would hope that only like 14 were better, or, over the course of months, and just working to be, middle of the pack and just working to constantly be better. But I kind of thought, like, I played a lot of sports competitively as a younger person. And that's a fool's errand for me to go back to those sports, because my mid-40s self will never be as good as my 20-something self was.
It's the worst, but your brain doesn't realize it.
That's right. And you think you should do these things. Whereas
I used to be able to get to that faster.
Exactly. Like I used to be able to catch that ball. I used to be able to dive, and I'm afraid of it because I know my reaction times aren't as well. Yeah. But now when I improve at tennis, that is the best I have ever been.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
That's great. Well, we end every episode with some rapid fire questions. Okay. So if you're ready, what is your hot take on working in-house?
Oh, gosh, I love it. I love it so much. You have so much more skin in the game. You get to be a part of something over and over and over. I think increasingly in-house, we are keeping the bet the farm type issues and tasks, and farming out the things that are less consequential. Certainly if something has direct impact to our company's bottom line, that's something that I'm going to want to have a lot of stake in.
That's awesome. What is your number one networking tip for listeners?
Tell me more about that.
That's your tip. Love it. What is the best career advice that you've ever given or received?
Wow. Well, I'm in Nashville, so I will quote Dolly Parton, who said, I don't give advice. I will share my life experiences. So I try to do that and not give advice. I think I would share that what I shared at the beginning, sometimes jumping into the unknown is really, really scary. A friend said at one point she left a job and went somewhere for a year and then moved on to another job. And she said that she was at the point where she had to go somewhere. Yeah. So it wasn't a failure that the first place that she went didn't work out. It was a part of the journey. And I think that's a really great piece of information. Like sometimes you just got to move forward, and maybe that first square isn't the right spot, but the victory is in moving forward at all.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And then finally, what is a charity or a cause that's close to your heart that we can help expose our listeners to and amplify through our channels?
Wow. Oh, that is gorgeous. I love that. Synaptic neuroscience in Calgary, synaptic rehabilitation, is a wonderful place. It has helped my dad very much since his stroke. It is primarily focused on stroke and spinal cord injuries. And Synaptic, it is based in the Calgary area. But the technology is amazing. And in particular, the team, the therapists there are phenomenal. They work together in a team. They are so positive, and they really help out with people that need it.
That's awesome. Well, we'll definitely get the contact information and get it out there.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for joining us. This was an awesome conversation. And for those listening, thanks for joining us as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. And if you have any topics for discussion or guests you'd like to see on the show, feel free to submit them to cockpitcounsel@linksquares.com.